In a surprise move, the Atlanta Braves decided to stay in-house by naming Walt Weiss as the new manager. We'll talk about it all in today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at shortstopball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below, as it does help out the show a ton when you do those things and helps others find us there on YouTube. On the audio side, where we still get the majority of our listeners, I understand you don't want to look at my face. It's certainly okay. It's a face that only a mother could love, but I appreciate you listening in anyway. You can help out too. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. And please make sure that you do continue to tune in every day, as we got a lot coming your way. And in fact, I had an entire episode planned for today, but the Braves decided to change those plans, which could happen a lot this offseason. I said I think it's going to be a very busy winter for the Atlanta Braves, and we kick it off today with the news of Walt Weiss being named as the Atlanta Braves manager, news that caught a lot of us by surprise, and we're going to be talking all about it on today's episode of Locked On Braves, which is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So Brian Snitker stepped down at the end of the season, and many of us believe that this was a mutual thing where Brian Snitker decided to step down, but at the same time, maybe was not pushed, but hinted that maybe it was time to step down. And we all kind of thought that and assumed that, even though AA didn't say that, and AA said that if Snit wanted to come back, that he would be back. Today's news kind of makes you actually want to believe what AA said, that it really was Snit's decision to step down. Because outside of that, I don't know why Walt Weiss was named the manager today. Because it felt like, from a fan's perspective, and I'm going to do a lot of off-the-cuff ranting, not ranting, but just kind of rumbling today. So forgive me, this feels a little all over the place than normal. But it felt like with the decision of Brian Snitker to step down, and like I said, at least from the outside, none of us really bought into the fact that it was his decision. We all kind of just assumed and believed that it was going to be a changing of the guard, that this was going to be an opportunity to get a new voice in here to reinvigorate this core and hopefully get them back into that World Series formula projection. Get this core back to, competing for World Series, which, look, since they won it in 2021, and we're now getting years and years away from that, really haven't done much in the postseason. You had a great 2022, one of the best regular seasons I've ever witnessed in 2023, but you haven't advanced in the postseason since then. And we all just kind of thought maybe a new voice is needed, maybe a new perspective is needed to start pushing this core and this team and this franchise in the right direction. And that's what it felt like. Brian Snitker stepping down, getting pushed out, whatever you want to say. That's what it felt like was happening here. And then when the managerial search goes on for nearly a month, again, from an outside perspective, and this is why I told you nobody knows. Look, go and read Mark Bowman's post from today, and you can see how nobody knows what is going on. And that's no disrespect to Mark Bowman, who knows more about this than any of us. If anybody's going to have sources, it's going to be, him or David O'Brien. But even they have no clue. They're all just guessing and assuming. But because it did go on for a month, we all just kind of assumed that it's going to be an outside hire. That if it were going to be Walt Weiss, or if it were going to be Eddie Perez, and you were just going to kind of pass the baton, that would have happened weeks ago. We all thought, okay, after the Tigers got eliminated, if George Lombard is your serious candidate, now's your opportunity to do that. And that didn't happen. And so then weeks went on and we said, okay, well, maybe they're waiting on Danny Lehman. So we'll wait for the end of the World Series. Well, that ended and that didn't happen. And then at the end of the day, it was just Walt Weiss. And so, look, the move feels uninspiring. It feels lazy, as I saw somebody say in the comment section here. That doesn't mean it's a bad decision. I want to be very clear about that. We all can have our opinions on what we think the Braves should have done. But just because you didn't want Walt Weiss, and just because you wanted to see a new voice, you wanted to see somebody from the outside, as I did, Walt Weiss would have been way down my list because I wanted a fresh voice. I wanted an outside perspective to try to reinvigorate this team and get them back on the right track. Because for as good of a job as Brian Snitker did, Brian Snitker did a great job of guiding this young team into a perennial postseason team and a World Series contender, making a championship series, winning a World Series. Brian Snitker did that and did a fantastic job of it. But like I said, since winning that World Series, it feels like they've almost gone down and down each and every year. You can blame the injuries if you want, and that's part of it. But also there's a lot of players on this team that have regressed, especially since that 2023 season. And so it just felt like to me that a new voice was warranted. And that you just needed somebody to come in with kind of a fresh set of eyes to really get this team going. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration, because I see the comments from fans and the DMs and people just upset about this move for Walt Weiss. And I get it. And I get your frustration because I'm one of those fans too, who thought the best course of action for this team going forward was to go outside of the organization, was to bring in a new voice. And that didn't happen. And to just what we all think, again, we don't know. I don't know that George Lombard would have been a great manager. Everything I hear about him, says that he will be, but we don't know that. We don't know that Danny Lehman will make a great manager. He's never even managed a team himself. We don't know that. We're all just hoping and guessing that the new thing will be the right thing. The whole grass is greener on the other side. That's what we're all hoping for here with this managerial hire, that just this new thing would have been a better thing. But there's no proof that would have been the case. It just feels at the end of the day like they were scared to go outside of the Braves' way. They were scared to go outside of the box. And you never know what's outside of that box until you take that risk. And I think there's these last 2 years with how just that feeling that we have as fans, we just feel stuck. It just feels like something's not right here. And again, I know the injuries are a big part of it, but it's still, it hasn't felt right the last 2 years. And I think for a lot of you, myself included, you felt like this was an opportunity to kind of push that to the side and start over fresh. And instead, when I heard the Walt Weiss hire, and we're the same team. It feels like you're just getting a younger Brian Snitker. And again, Snitker did great things for the Atlanta Braves. He was a great manager, took them to a championship series, won a World Series, took them to the postseason 7 straight years. He was a great manager. I don't want to dismiss that, but it did feel like the direction of this team with that manager was going down, and you replaced him with a guy that many of us think is going to be a carbon copy. That's what we think. We don't know that. And so I think that's why a lot of you and myself as well, were very underwhelmed by this news and by this decision. But again, it doesn't mean this is the wrong decision. Just because we wanted something different doesn't mean that different would have been better. And again, this coaching staff has been very, very successful. So that's kind of my TED talk on the hire, as you will, getting some of my thoughts out. But ultimately, and we're going to obviously talk more about it in the coaching changes, I think that's the next big part of this. Look, as great as Brian Snitker was, he was as great as his staff was behind him. Everybody knows that. And that included Walt Weiss. It included Ron Washington. It included, Eric Young, all of those guys. We all know that Brian Snitker was as great as he was as a manager because of the staff he had around him. And that's going to be the next big thing for Walt Weiss. Who does he surround himself with? We'll talk more about that next, as well as Walt Weiss's record with the Rockies, what type of manager that he might be. We'll get into all that here next. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Yeah, I've used Game Time to go to Braves games. I've used it this offseason to go to a college football game. It's that simple. I love it. You get a view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be looking at, and there's no surprise fees when you get to the checkout screen. It's that easy to use. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Just swipe ticket, tap ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Getting choked up talking about the Walt Weiss hire here today. Appreciate you bearing with me here as we are recording live, unfortunately. But getting back into our discussion for today for Walt Weiss as the manager. The next big thing for Walt Weiss is going to be who he surrounds himself with. And look, as great as Brian Snitker was, as I said, it all depends on who's around him and what his coaching staff is going to look like. Chipper Jones already tweeted and said he's excited for Walt Weiss. That's his dude. If Chipper Jones becomes the hitting coach tomorrow, I feel much more comfortable with this hire. If Ron Washington comes back as a third base coach, I feel much more better about this hire. A lot of it's going to be dependent on who he surrounds himself with and who stays. There was a big shift for the Braves offense this past year with Tim hires. There was clearly an approach and an adjustment to be more patient, to draw more walks. There was clearly an approach change that I think could be a good one, but as we talked about all season long, I just don't know if this personnel is able to do that. Do they continue with that plan, or do they scrap that and get somebody different? Do they get a Chipper Jones? Do they get a different voice in there for the offense, which has struggled the last 2 years? Blame the injuries if you want, but the offense has taken steps back the last 2 years. If Chipper Jones were to be named the hitting coach, I'd feel a lot better about it. But again, that's the same thing too we can say for a manager. We all just assume that Chipper's going to be a great hitting coach. We don't necessarily know that. We've heard good stories of him helping hitters out. Does Cranny stay as a pitching coach? I think this certainly leads to the possibility of more coaches staying, like Cranny, like Eddie Perez and others. I think this definitely leads to the possibility of more of those guys staying around. But who does he fill out his staff with? Doesn't an EY come back? I think a lot of this could be, I think a lot of us could feel better about this hire depending on who he surrounds himself with. Because, you obviously, Walt Weiss is the manager, but there's going to be a lot of voices on that team around him, helping him out. And so we'll see what happens in the coming days, obviously, but that's going to be the next big thing for Walt Weiss and this hire is who does he surround himself with and what type of coaches does he surround himself with? Do we get any new voices in here? Maybe we do get somebody that is more analytically minded as the bench coach. And that kind of fills the gap for what a lot of us were wanting. We're not necessarily that full old school type approach that Brian Snitker had, but getting more of somebody that, at least for what I wanted, somebody that's a little bit of both, somebody that has a little bit of that old school mentality, but also can, go to the analytics when he needs to and knows how to use those more appropriately and use a left-handed reliever against against the side that actually works, and to hit a right-handed hitter against righties if they're better against righties, and using the splits and using the data in the right way. And again, maybe he gets somebody on his coaching staff to help him with that. But looking at Walt Weiss and his managerial record, he did have 4 years in Colorado, none of them particularly great, but it was Colorado. He had won 74, 66, 68, and 75 games. Now, the 2 years after that, the Rockies had winning seasons. So was he building up to that? And he just happened to be the guy that, got moved out right before they were ready to win? I don't know, but it's definitely not great. And look, it's hard to judge any manager off what they do in Colorado, but his time there was not great. That's also been almost 10 years. What has he learned since then as a manager? He's 61 years old now. What has he learned since that point? As far as I know, he's only gotten one managerial interview since then, was with the Marlins, I believe in 2022. But that's a lot of time. And I'm sure he has grown as a manager himself. And I can't wait to see what it looks like. I mean, once I get past the initial just shock of, wow, this feels pretty uninspiring and boring, I am excited to see what type of approach that Walt Weiss brings and who he surrounds himself with. I think that's going to be the key here. Is who he surrounds himself with and what type of manager he's going to be. Just looking through some of the comment section real quick. Soul Still Burns says if Chipper becomes hitting coach at Beans, he's dedicated. I'm like, if Chipper wants to be the hitting coach, he should have been named the hitting coach already. That is definitely something that should happen. Again, we all don't know, but the offense has been so bad the last 2 years. I'm willing to take a chance on Chipper Jones. And some people are worried, is it going to tarnish his reputation here in Atlanta? No, I mean, he is a Braves legend. His number is retired. If he comes in as a bad hitting coach for 2 or 3 years before they move on, it's not going to tarnish his legacy as an Atlanta Brave. Interesting comment. This from Guav on X, Gaurav, who says, everyone's free to have their own opinion, but one factor consider that I have been informed of is that Walt Weiss reportedly has a fantastic relationship with Ronald and is one of the closest members of the organization to him. Like, you shouldn't hire a guy just based on his relationship with one player, even if it is your most important player. Say what you want about Ronald. He is the Atlanta Braves' most talented, best, and important player. And so to have a guy in Walt that's not going to bat him seventh, it's not nothing. Again, it can't be the only reason that you hire the guy, but I do think that does mean a little bit, at least to us. I don't think it was necessarily so much in the hire. Joe Me says all the guys love Walt. I mean, all the guys have said they love Snit. They love this coaching staff. And also, what are they going to say? But that is a big thing. Look, and at the end of the day, and I say this all the time when we talk about coaches, whether we're talking about the hitting coach last year, this managerial surge, the biggest part of the manager's job in today's game is the relationships and the guys trusting him and knowing that, they put him in a certain spot, they trust he knows why he's doing that. And having those relationships, that is the biggest part of being a manager today. Outside of that, it's really just obviously the in-game management, the bullpen management, more so than anything. But I think the biggest thing for a manager in today's game are the relationships. At the end of the day, these players who are making 10, 15, $20 million a year, they are the ones that they're going to decide this. I mean, if Austin Riley comes back and is Austin Riley, this team's going to be great. If Acuña comes back and he's MVP Acuña, this team's going to be great. Olson does what he does, they're going to be great. Drake, follows up with a good sophomore season, he's going to be great. If these guys play to their capability, this is a great team. No matter who the manager, it doesn't matter if I'm managing this team. If they play like they're capable of, this is a winning team. So as big of a deal as we make about the manager, and I do think, obviously, it counts for something, ultimately the players are the ones who get it done. And that's what it's going to come down to. And it's going to come down to, what help do you get, Walt Weiss? Do you fix the holes in the team this offseason? Also been some rumblings that maybe this wasn't an Alex Anthopoulos hire, that maybe Terry McGurk, has more hands-on in this, and this was more his decision, wanting to keep things in-house. Don't know that. Nothing confirmed there. Just a lot of rumors and speculation floating around about that. But the decisions on who to bring in the offseason and the players to bring in, that's on Alex Anthopoulos. I've said This offseason will determine the future for Alex Anthopoulos as the GM. So I hope this was his decision, and I hope this is somebody that he very much believes in. But outside of that, what he does the rest of this offseason, the players that he brings in, I just had a podcast yesterday, my ideal offseason. I gave you 5 moves that I think Alex needs to make this offseason. He makes those 5 moves. It doesn't necessarily have to be the players that I put out there, but you make those 5 moves. You go and get a starting pitcher. You go and get 2 relievers. You go and shore up the shortstop position. You get a big bat. I don't care who the manager is. And everybody else on the team plays the way they're capable. Riley comes back healthy and plays like himself. Ozzie and Michael Harris aren't complete negatives for half the season. This is a postseason World Series contending team. I truly believe that. But AA has to get those things done, and he's got to help out Walt Weiss. And again, I think at the end of the day, if those players are doing what they're supposed to do, Walt Weiss's job is going to be easy, just like Brian Snickers was for so many years. You just roll out Acuña in the leadoff spot. You're all the same lineup every day, and this team mashes, and they score, and they win. As Michael Frazier says, if A doesn't address holes, then he should be gone. I agree. This is a huge offseason for Alex Anthopoulos. It starts with this managerial hire, but that managerial hire doesn't mean much if you don't go fill these holes. If you don't go out and spend big after cutting last year, like still a top 10 payroll. Let's not act like this Braves team is cheap, but we know they can do more. We know they're capable of spending and doing more. And you don't do that this offseason, it's going to be a complete failure for Alex, for this front office. It's going to be a complete failure to the franchise, to this fan base that has supported them, that has poured a lot of money into them. It's going to be a complete failure. But for Walt Weiss, I would just ask that we all give him some grace. We give him some patience. And while we're all upset, or not all of us, but a lot of us are upset and frustrated because this felt like the easy thing to do, the lazy thing to do. It wasn't the out-of-the-box hire we all were, again, not all of us, but a lot of us were hoping for. It doesn't mean he can't be a good manager. And if you go get him the right players, I promise you he can be a great manager, because I can be a great manager with the right players. I could win a World Series with the Dodgers. I don't know about that, but you get the point that I'm trying to make here. It ultimately comes down to the players. The players love Walt Weiss. We got to see what his in-game management is going to be. Is he going to be a little bit more analytically minded? Who does he surround himself with? So there's still a lot more to talk about when it comes to this Walt Weiss hire. But those are just some of my initial thoughts. And again, I see all of your frustrations and your comments, and I get it. But again, let's just all pump the brakes a little bit and see how the rest of this offseason plays out. You go through, you hire White Walls, which feels like a boring kind of hire, and then you don't do much this offseason. There's going to be some really bad vibes going into next year. I can promise you that. But you hire Walt Weiss, and then you go get Cody Bellinger. You trade for, a big arm, and you're feeling a lot better about this team going to next thing. You somehow sign Ha-Seong Kim, and I promise you the vibes will be there no matter who the manager is going into next season. Next, we will talk about Ha-Seong Kim and his decision and all the other option decisions that were made on Monday. We'll get into all that here next. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. You can check out FanDuel.com right now. It's going to give you the odds for next year's World Series, where the Dodgers are heavy favorites. The Braves are down there in the 8th spot, though, at plus 2,000. We'll see how those odds tick up throughout the offseason. Right now, they got the Red Sox, Astros, Mariners, Mets, and Phillies, Yankees, and Dodgers ahead of them. You can check out the NBA odds over there for the finals, the NBA Cup, all that you can see right there at FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I didn't say it earlier as I was having a bit of a coughing fit. Thank you so much for sitting through that with me. But I appreciate you for being here with me on Locked On Braves, making this your first listen of every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Solely getting you caught up on all the action happening around Major League Baseball. Later coming up this week, I will have on Wednesday, unless more news breaks, we will talk about the trade targets that are out there. NBA Trade Rumors put out their top 40 trade candidates, and we will go through that list. I'll tell you who makes sense for the Braves. We'll also have our mailbag episode on Friday and anything else that happens. We got some more option decisions coming this week, some qualifying offer decisions for some Braves free agents that they might be going after. So a lot to talk about here this week on the podcast. So make sure that you are subscribed. One big thing we all were waiting on was the Ha-Seong Kim decision, and we officially got that on Monday as he declined his $16 million player option and will become a free agent. So whatever sliver of hope that you were holding on to that Ha-Seong Kim was going to pick up that option is now officially gone. And if the Braves want him, they're going to have to pay. We'll see what happens. Obviously, you get into free agency, things can get crazy. He might be the best shortstop on the market if you don't consider Bo Bichette to be a shortstop. I'll just tell you this. The Braves have put themselves in this situation. I've said that already multiple times this offseason. I'm not spending more than $20 million a year on Ha-Seong Kim. I'm finding some other solution. And if I'm getting to that point, how much more am I paying for Bo Bichette? Who, again, I could live with it shortstop if you're getting him offense, and I could eventually move him to second base, DH, if I have to. But I'm not getting into a bidding war for Ha-Seong Kim, for a guy who is average offensively, and the defense last year, obviously very injury-riddled, was not all that great. I'm not letting the market drive up his price to a point where he's getting paid like an elite level shortstop, which he is not. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. Again, 3 years, 55, 60 million, I can live with, but it gets much more than that. I'm very uncomfortable signing Ha-Seong Kim, who's had troubles staying healthy himself. And like I said, when healthy, he's been a league average offensive player. Matt Olson won his second straight Gold Glove, his third Gold Glove overall. Glad to see him get that award. He was outstanding this past year. It was really fun to watch the Braves defense. It was one of the best things about watching this team this past season, whether it was Nick Allen, Michael Harris, Matt Olson, Austin Riley early on until something happened with him there. Maybe it was the abdominal injury. I don't know, but Braves defense was a lot of fun to watch. Ronald and his cannon out there in right field, but Matt Olson clearly, the Gold Glove winner, maybe the best first baseman in all of baseball right there with Vlad Jr. in 2025. I'm not going to mention this next one on here, but because we got the hire now, but that was some of the Braves news. Oh, and also Dale Murphy on the latest list of Hall of Fame candidates, the new list on the Eras Committee coming up. It's a big list on there. If you take out the steroid guys, then I think maybe he has a chance, but we'll see what happens if Dale Murphy can finally get into the Hall of Fame. Some other option news on Monday. I might have missed some after the Walt Weiss news. I kind of lost track, but players who either they declined their option or the team declined the option. Brandon Woodruff, Lucas Giolito, Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, Cody Bellinger, Robert Suarez, Alex Bregman, Randall Grichuk, Michael Lorenzen, and Michael King all were declined or they declined. Very interested in several of those guys, whether it be King, Bellinger, obviously I'm very high on. Edwin Diaz, you could steal him away from the Mets would be great. Robert Suarez, even, I think he and Raisel Iglesias are kind of in the same boat. Upper 30s, really good job as closers. Suarez, maybe a little bit more dominant type stuff, but has never really had the strikeout numbers. So some interesting names there who decline. Of course, some of those guys could get qualifying offers, which makes it a little bit more difficult to sign them. Guys who accepted their offers or had their player options picked up: Wandy Peralta, Lourdes Gurriel, Tyler O'Neill, and AJ Minter coming off an injured season will be back with the Mets. The Marlins promoted Gabe Kapler to GM, and I was laughing at them this morning for making a boring kind of, that seems like a dumb hire, and then the Walt Weiss decision happened. I don't think it's quite that level. I think that Marlins organization is going downhill pretty quickly, unfortunately there. I'm just not a big believer in Gabe Kapler. He was embarrassing as a manager, and who knows if he'll do any better as a GM. Over 30 million people tuned in to Game 7 of the World Series, the highest number since 2017, which was against the Dodgers and the Astros. So, despite the Dodgers ruining baseball and all us hating him, sometimes that villain really, can increase the attendance, the eyes of the audience. Obviously, in the game 7, it's going to draw more eyes anyway. But you also, I think part of it was you had that team that David going up against the Goliath, and they had a chance to get it done. And it was obviously one of the greatest game 7s you'll ever witness. So that helped. But it's very interesting seeing those numbers for the World Series and so many people tuning in. And seems like baseball's in a pretty good place. And then you got the CBA coming up next offseason. So we'll see if the owners and the players can absolutely ruin that. But great to see. PJ Spray says Vitello may give Kapler a run for his money in terms of being an embarrassment as a manager. I don't know. I mean, like, he did great things at Tennessee and he did them really quickly. But how does that equate from college to MLB? We've never seen them before, so we don't know. Regular says Braves' future ain't looking so bright either. I don't know about that either. Again, it depends on what happens this offseason. I can get past the boring move of the hire, and again, we'll see what happens when he gets his staff around him. I still think the future can be very bright for this team, but you got to make some moves. You definitely have to. Michael Frazier says trade for a shortstop. Yeah, if Ha-Seong Kim's range gets up there to a certain point, I agree. You're going to have to try to look for a trade somewhere. MLB Rank says World Series viewership was 50% higher than the NBA Finals. I saw that post too as well. Apparently, the NBA Finals went in 7 games last year. I don't even remember who won it until this season started. But yeah, I saw that post too about the Game 7 viewership being 50% higher than the NBA Game 7, which is crazy because ESPN would lead you to believe that the NBA is the most popular sport in the world. Eve Fuentes says, don't be surprised if Bellinger ends up back home with the Dodgers. I don't necessarily know what their needs are going to be, but it wouldn't surprise me. The Dodgers are not going to sit back. Devilry guy says, Jay, can you play shortstop? I absolutely can. But my arm might not hold up to make too many throws to shortstop. But I'll catch it. I just don't know if I can throw it right now. Nick says, what trade options would you have at the top of your list for starting pitching? We'll talk about that tomorrow. There are a lot of trade options out there for starting pitcher, and we'll get into a list of those names tomorrow as well. Video Moonshot says, Ha-Seong Kim from the Dodgers for shortstop. I don't think he's an everyday player. I think he's a bench utility type player, but obviously haven't seen enough of him at this point. Serge says promoting Weiss might mean AA still is the smartest guy in the GM rude mode. We'll see. Again, a lot of people believe in this wasn't necessarily his choice. I don't know if I buy that or not. And I do worry that it is just a sign of things staying the way that they were. But hey, let's be honest, before 2025, things were going pretty well for this team. So there's a case to be made that there's no reason to really shake things up. The Braves have been one of the most winningest franchises for a long time. I grew up in the 90s. All they did was win. And even through the 2010s, there was still a lot of winning going on. And for the last, 7 years, 7 of the last 8 years, they've been doing nothing but winning. So again, the Braves way is not necessarily a bad way, but it did feel like it was time for maybe a little bit of a shift and a new voice. Joe Me says Nick Allen is now 50-50 our starting shortstop in 26. I do, the moment that Ha-Seong Kim hits free agency, the odds of Nick Allen being the shortstop for next year go up increasingly. Matt Cart says Jake and Ozzie as our middle infielders could be rough with the arm streak. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we won't be turning a lot of double plays with us up the middle there. Double A says, are we going to put a qualifying offer on Kim? That's a good question. I don't know. Doubtful. I don't even know that Ha-Seong Kim can get one. I don't think he's gotten one yet because I'm pretty sure he's been with the Padres since he came over. That's $22 million for 1 year, but to get your shortstop. And then if he does decline it, you get a pick out of it. No, he got traded during the season yeah, I don't know that he can have one. I'll go look that up and I'll try to, give that answer tomorrow, but I don't know that they can give him a qualifying offer this offseason because of the way that he was acquired. I know when you're traded, you can't do that, but so I'm pretty sure that you won't be able to do that with Ha-Seong Kim. Joe Me, thank you. He was traded to us. So when you're traded mid-season, you can't put the qualifying offer on him. You got to be with that team the entire season. Serge says, do you think Nacho is definitely out at shortstop? I do. I think if they still had that idea, they would have played him there more in the Arizona Fall League where he is hitting really, really well. But he's been playing third base, or at least last that I looked, he had him at third base. I think if they were going to move him back to shortstop, they would have done that in the Arizona Fall League. Without doing this episode of Locked On Braves, thanks so much for bearing with me in this one. I know my voice kind of giving out early on there. It's that time of year. Unfortunately, the cold weather coming back. But thank you so much for joining me here at Locked On Braves. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the Walt Weiss hire. How do you feel about it? Let me know down below. If you're listening on the audio version, thank you so much for your support as well. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will talk to you next time.